Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. We have an interesting episode for you today. We're doing a little bit of an intro here, and then we do end up having Austin Krell on the pod, which was a really fun interview with him. He was a great guest. So to get started, Sean, how are you, brother?
I'm all right. I'm a week into quarantine. I'm feeling a whole lot better, but still got a couple more days to go before I'm a free man, but I'm hanging in there and doing all right.
Yeah, you're doing your time before you can get out. We're coming off, it's Victory Monday, man. Eagles get a big win yesterday. Could be an exciting Philadelphia team, but let's not
Yeah.
get ahead of ourselves too much, right? Because we've done that too many times over to count. So before we get into everything with Austin, which was a great interview, by the way, we're gonna do some fun things here. Talk, not get too serious about it yet, because we're still about 2 weeks away from training camp starting until all these things, all the stories start to unravel for real. And everyone puts their money where their mouth is, literally. So Sean, if you want to intro your little question, and we'll talk about where the Sixers had their best chance of winning.
Yeah, so I had a tough way exactly wording where I wanted this to say, but I guess basically the way I'm cutting it up is, when do you think was the Sixers' best title chance, and when was the window open the most? And maybe that still hasn't happened yet, but out of the four legitimate like contending teams we have, I just kind of rank those and what I think was our best opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's pretty like the best clear chance, especially seeing how the rest of the playoffs ended up playing out. Was the 2018-2019 Sixers,
Right.
which ended against the Raptors in Game 7.
Bounce.
Loaded with star power. That starting lineup was unbelievable. And they played the eventual champions down to the last second of the last game in the series. And then the way the Warriors ended up getting hurt, and they're like KD obviously missing the first couple games and then tearing his Achilles in that. Is it Game 3 or Game 4 that he?
I think 3. I feel like it was early.
Yeah, I feel like it was 3 too. So, I mean, that one still. I literally saw that on Instagram today, and like the caption was just like, "Where were you when this happened?" And I was like, "I don't know why you do this to me. Like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't deserve
still
this."
get pain in my heart from that shot.
Yeah, it's just like it's gut wrenching, and it's like I know what happens. I've seen the video. I mean, I watched it obviously, but like just watching it again is something like so ominous and like makes my stomach turn over. Just because like, and again, that's honestly probably the biggest reason is that like they had a real chance, and I mean if they had anyone other than Greg Monroe, they'd probably win that series. But like, I
Yeah.
think that's probably it. I mean, what is your ranking?
No, I agree. I think that has to be number one. And just the Simmons, Butler, Harris, Redick, and Embiid starting lineup when we still had Rocco, Dario, Mike Scott, Shamit, and the whole Markelle Fultz coming onto the scene situation. Like that team that was it. And that was the peak of kind of all our chips in the middle. And if things would work out differently with Jimmy Butler, maybe it's sticking around, maybe that stays a little open. But for me, that was the team and certainly our best opportunity. And I do genuinely believe that if that shot does not go in, we go to overtime. If we find a way to win that game, we pretty clearly could be winning the championship right now. And just our whole tune of this roster building, this organization, everything's probably significantly different. Obviously, we're not
Brown's
there.
a legend if they win that.
Yeah, obviously we're not there, but and we're still searching for that. As far as number 2 for how close we were, I'm even going to step back to the year before that. And this was still young Simmons, young Embiid, but when we had Rocco, Redick, and Saric in the starting lineup with Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova coming off the bench, there was something about just how fluid that team was, the way things flying around, the ball jetting, the movement, the dribble handoffs, just everything about that team I loved, and just the personalities. To me, that worked better than what we've had recently. And I love that team, and there was so much hope back then, that period of time. There's so much like life to it that I still think that was our second best roster we put together.
Yeah, I think you're teasing the process fetishizers, like the people that just love the process. But I mean, man, yeah, looking back on that run and the Simmons, that series against the Heat, his first year, man, was he so good. And just like, I mean, there was something about him and Redick. There was something about him and Rocco. There's something even with him and Dario in that series. And, they got beat. And then it was kind of the like embarrassing Bellinelli shot that won the game, but then it obviously did not win the game. Like the confetti and everything.
Yeah.
Just like, Man, I look back on that team very fondly. I do. But again, it hurts. Like that
Mhm.
it really does hurt looking back on that squad, because like you knew there was kind of that like something big has to happen soon where they make that change, and like obviously Rocco and Dario end up being moved for Jimmy Butler in that trade. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that, and then the painful loss to the Celtics in round two, and then the even more painful loss to the Raptors, and then somehow like a pretty fine, like a disgusting loss to the Celtics the next year. Like I don't know, man. You mentioned how much hope you had in those time periods, and the way you looked at the future, and we all looked at the future at that point, and it was so like I don't want to be that guy, but it was so much better and more enjoyable. It was like the peak of my Sixers fan, and was like it didn't get hurt by them as much as I was just like, okay, they're getting there, and then the Horford move is one we don't even ever talk about anymore, thank God.
We're about
But
to.
I guess we are about to, really. Yeah, go ahead.
One more in between. This is another kind of great vibes, but the sustenance wasn't there. Is this year's roster with Ben, Tobias, Embiid, Curry, and Danny Green, and then obviously we got the Shake and Maxey off the bench, which Maxey's obviously a positive piece to this. That's exciting, but I still think this is similar to the 17-18 team to me, and the way that like everyone was likable, the vibes were there, but it just lacked that top level talent, and that's what we kind of sold our soul for the Butler and that, but we don't really have as many chips in the deck for this one.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about like the team from game one to the very last game who had the most realistic shot of winning the championship, like I think it was this year's team,
Yeah, I
right?
agree with that. Just as far as I feel like the NBA was falling apart in that we had a chance to seize that opportunity, but that
Yeah.
was not created by us having this great of a team. And like
No.
they tried to stack the paths as great as possible, getting the 1 seed. But dude, we lost to the Hawks. We lost to the Atlanta Hawks. We did not even like. I think we would be sitting here okay with it right now if we were sent back by the Bucks in the conference finals. And not that we're
Absolutely.
feeling great by any means, but there's definitely not this sense of panic that there has been this offseason. And the
No,
fact that not even
absolutely
reach
not.
there, like, is super depressing.
Yeah, no. You're absolutely right. If you do get past, like, if you literally just lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, like, now it's like kind of comical to think, like, oh man, if they would have just lost 4 games later instead of in game seven of round two, like, we would have been cool. I mean, but again, we were talking about this year's team from the start as like they have a chance, they have a real chance, and the spacing was there, and I don't really know, man. I don't know what. At this point you could basically put any roster out on the floor in the Wells Fargo Center, and there is an ability to convince me that they are good enough to win. Like, I convinced myself that the 2019 team was good enough to win. I convinced myself that the 2020 team was good enough to win. I convinced myself that this year's team was good enough to win. Maybe I'm gullible, and that might very well be true, but damn, dude, it's like this was going to be a fun, like, a fun little intro to this interview, but man, it's getting me in my feels. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, this might have been a bad idea on my part. I'm kind of in my bag too. But the last team, which I do think this is the worst, is this was like the bubble built team, and this is Ben, Tobias, Josh Richardson, Al Horford, and Joel Embiid, and just fundamentally was not built right as a roster. I'm excited to see Horford and Jay Rich run it back with the Celtics. That's kind of, I guess,
I kind of forgot about that.
yeah, I guess that's what's getting me through this. But that team had no shot.
Dude, Jay Rich, bro, what the hell happened? Like, he was the guy that I was like, all right, like, here we go. We got a load of Josh Richardson. Let's go. Let's do this. And then it was like, oh, he just got worse. Like,
Yeah, and he
the
continues to get
days went
worse.
by. Yeah, I know. The days went by, and maybe like the NBA is kind of passing by in terms of what his skill set is. Like, it's just unnecessary. And like, he's not like the only guy that plays in a similar fashion as he does is like DeMar DeRozan.
So I was thinking, yeah,
But like DeMar DeRozan is elite at everything that he does, whereas like Josh Richardson's like just like above average at like that stuff, and he's terrible shot selection, questionable decision making, not nearly good enough as a ball handler
he
to.
defends.
And he does, and he's a high effort guy, and that was the thing is like it took me so long to really commit to that realization of like he's not that good, is because he is a very likable guy and a very likable player, and like when they would win and he would talk about it, I'm like, hell yeah, Jay Rich, like you're a dog. Like we love that here. But then it was like, dude, you're just not that good, and a horrible backcourt partner for Ben in that as well.
Yeah, and so I guess those are our 4 real contenders that we've built. Looking ahead to next year, the roster is just about the exact same as it was this year for the team that I said lacked the sustenance to win. So hopefully that's fixed. I'm sure there's still a lot that's going to go down, but yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks away from training camp, man, and we talked about it. We'll end up talking about it with Austin Krell a lot, but there's a lot to unfold within the next like month, really, because we're just a little like we're 5 weeks away from opening night, which is again another insane thing. Like I started school 4 weeks ago, and it feels like I just started. So like 4 weeks will fly by without even thinking about it, and like once training camp starts and once they get into preseason and everything, like there's just a lot. Like I'm getting nervous at like what might end up happening, because like the everyone's idea is, what's going to happen is going to happen, but at this point we really do not know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's we're not in the best situation. We're going to talk about that a lot with Austin, so I don't want to dive in too much, but definitely disappointing looking back at this and thinking how much more optimistic I was with these first 2 teams than I am with these last 2, and that definitely says a lot about the Sixers as a whole, but it's where we're at.
I think it says a lot about just being a Philadelphia sports fan and like getting older. Like,
yeah.
And I used to get mad at my dad for always being so negative about everything. I'm like, dude, it's not that bad. Like they have this guy and they can do this and that and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, they're still going to lose. And I hated it. I used to hate it so much. And now it's like, he's kind of right. Like he was kind of right. So
I refuse to ever accept it, though. I refuse to ever.
I won't either. And the Eagles winning the Super Bowl was probably like the best and worst thing simultaneously that could have ever happened to me, because it was like, obviously the Eagles win the Super Bowl. I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. But then it was like, oh my God, I expect this all the time. Like this is the best feeling ever. It's like being an addict. Like I want that feeling again so badly. And like I love the Eagles, obviously, but I put a lot more effort and care and time into the Sixers. So, they'll continue to break my heart, and just like a toxic relationship, I'll be back. So no worries about that, I guess. But I guess without further ado, we'll get into the interview with Austin Krell, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. Our guest is here now, Austin Krell. How are you, Austin?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are a Sixers writer and NBA reporter for the Painted Lines. You've been doing this for a while. We're going to ask you a couple questions. We're going to have a great conversation. We're pretty excited to have you on, man. So we'll talk about it first. Just NBA.com's ranking top 10 NBA players. Joel Embiid's listed as the 7th best NBA player, right in front of James Harden and right behind Luka Doncic. How do you feel about that? Is that where you would rank him, or do you have any gripe with that at all?
Yeah, I'd rank him number 1.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds like biased, but I mean, I just think objectively, like runner up for MVP. He's a 2-way player, so he's better than Jokic in that regard. Jokic won the MVP, so I mean, I think there's a fair case for him to be the top player in the league. I know we say like barring injury, but I mean, I think like the injury thing is an asterisk that you can put on anybody. So I mean. I would say right now, I think I would, assuming all is equal, I'd probably take him. I mean, as the best player in the league, because he's coming off the best season, arguably. So,
yeah, Sean, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like a homer, like gassing up Joel Embiid as much as we do, but just the way he added the mid-range to his game and the way that's opened up everything for him is really such like a mastery on the offensive end, and just to tally that with how impactful he is defensively, and just the way like he already posts up more than just about anybody in the league, and he can take anybody one-on-one, and the way he's forcing doubles and just his game's fully coming together, it's tough to argue with that. And I still will give these guys respect and not call for the top spot yet. And there's so many great players in the league that you really can make a case for a lot of these guys, but I don't think it's wrong to say he's number 1 in any way. And I certainly love him, and I'm so happy he's here and he's the guy leading our franchise. So no complaints from me.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Austin.
Well, so I was just going to say, like, yeah, the mid-range is huge. It wasn't that he just added it. It was the efficiency just took like an insane step up, right? Like he was, I think, 42% from mid range, something like that, in his career up to that point, and he got it up to like 50%. He made an 8% jump, which is astronomical.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen, and that takes you from like a perennial all-star to like this guy is a top 3 player in the league right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible to watch him last year, and the jump in a lot of those areas was so clear, and then it's so understated how great he is defensively as well, and how big of an impact he makes on that end as the defensive anchor for the Sixers. And obviously, we'll move away from Embiid right here because the inevitable question is going to come up here, and we brought you on to talk about the full length of the Sixers. So just give us your overview on how you feel about the Ben Simmons situation. What do you expect going into this season? Just in general, how do you feel about it, and what do you expect to happen?
So I think it's a mess, first and foremost. Like, obviously a mess. I think it's like kind of uncharted territory in a sense because, yes, we see guys request trades all the time. It's a little different when it happens to the team that you're a fan of or the team that you cover professionally. But like the lasting memory of Ben Simmons is a low light for him in his career, right? And also, he's not universally considered like a top 10 player. The last couple guys that requested trades, like James Harden, is considered a top 10 player, top 5 player even. Jimmy Butler was considered like you could argue that he was in the top 10 when he requested his trade, what have you. Ben Simmons you're kind of at the point where you're not sure if he's like a top 25 player. So the fact that you see him requesting a trade is like kind of odd. I wouldn't say it's at all surprising though, just because of like if you take stock in like what Ben seems to be as a person, where he's very deflective of responsibility for himself and he doesn't like accountability for himself. He loves talking about accountability, doesn't like actually being accountable for himself. The fact that he was actually finally like his feet were held to the fire by somebody in Doc and in Embiid. I wouldn't say the writing's on the wall, but I would say like I'm not surprised that he's throwing it seems like it's a very public fit about it. How do I think it's going to end? I think what'll ultimately happen is he will show up to camp. I know it's been reported like he's prepared to hold out, yada yada yada. The best way for him to get out of Philadelphia, if that's what he really wants, which I think it's more about him looking ahead of the situation and saying, I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted. And that's why I went out, as opposed to like, nah, I'm like super offended by this. Like, I think it's part of it, but I don't think it's nearly what has been reported. So I think he'll realize that ultimately his best vehicle for moving on, if that's what he wants, is to show up and play and like restore his value a little bit. I think if it were a different organization figure, if it wasn't Daryl Morey, he probably would not, and he'd probably play the tactic that Rich Paul has threatened to this point. But I think Daryl is smart enough, and I think he's experienced enough to say, no. We recognize your value to us, even if we can't get out of the second round with you. We're going to hold you until we find the right offer. And I think his people, I think Ben's camp certainly knows that. They are hoping it wouldn't be the case, but I think they're pretty much aware of that at this point. And I just think that's the only way it's gonna end sooner rather than later. And I mean, that's the way I would operate too. I wouldn't give him up for pennies on the dollar. He's your last trade asset. So I mean, there's really, once you trade him, if you don't capitalize on your return, your upside's limited.
Yeah, absolutely. And super tough situation overall, super messy, and I hate that it even got here. But you're absolutely right in that, like, if they mess up this trade and this whole process, really, it sinks the whole ceiling of this team, and all the championship hopes really die if this isn't handled right. And I am thankful that Daryl Morey is the guy handling those with kid gloves and giving the Sixers the best chance to win. But it's tough to look at the Sixers as coming out as a winner in this situation, and really for anyone to come out a winner. Like the winning in Ben Simmons' mind is simply playing in another uniform, but there's so much more to that on the Sixers end, and getting the right return for his talent, which is so up in the air how it's rated or looked at nowadays, which is also frustrating. And there certainly has been such a pendulum that swung to the point where now Simmons is not really regarded as well as his talent should deserve. And he's such a unique player because of his skill set, and which makes everything so difficult. So really, like you said about the rankings of player, it's so interesting to me to watch play out, just because he's not the type of like guaranteed talent that fits any team that we typically see. And like when there's a James Harden available, James Harden can make any team in the NBA better. And that's simply not the case with Ben Simmons because of the restrictions in his game. And he's still a fine player and a guy that we should get a lot of return for. And I'm sure that's what Morey's looking at it. And certainly has been the case from like the reported what they're asking for back, which is absolutely what he should be doing. But I don't know. I have a hard time believing that it's at a fixable state. I understand the best way for him to get out of here is simply show up and play well. But I feel like in his little twisted mindset that it's past that point. And really, I have no idea what's going to happen. It's such an interesting thing to watch play out.
Yeah, and I mean, today there was another report. Brian Windhorst reported that there was a small market team that made a non-public offer that's on the table right now. Do you guys put any stake into that? Or is this just another Brian Windhorst report that may or may not be true?
I feel like it's something new every day. So it's so tough to gauge what's real, what's not. As far as like a team, I mean, until there's like names, and I frankly, I think the way the deal actually happens, if it were to happen for camp, is simply not a lot of buzz, and all of a sudden Ben Simmons is somewhere else. And that's the only way I see it getting solved beforehand. Honestly, I would be surprised if any sort of deal happens right now without some sort of training camp drama, whether it's him showing up with all the questions and everything that comes with it, or him not showing up and all the questions that come with that and all the answers that simply aren't there for what the solution this is. But I haven't heard anything of substance that I'm really buying into a trade happening in the near future.
Yeah. I think there is like a very distant world where perhaps you can at least put a Band-Aid on this situation a little bit. I don't know that it's beyond the point. I don't know that you can salvage it long term, but I think you can maybe get through this to a point where you can like play together for a little bit, and then maybe next offseason it happens. I'm a bigger proponent of them basically just like not tanking this season, but essentially like recognizing that they're not going to do anything this season and letting him sit all year if that's what it takes. If it means that you're getting closer to a Damian Lillard or a Bradley Beal or whatever. I mean, obviously you would have to do some convincing with Joel and I think there'll probably be some internal like discord or discussion about the feasibility of that between Daryl and Doc, because they're not guys that are there to rebuild or to sit and wait. They're there to win now. Mm-hmm. But I just think it's simply a situation where I think there's a world where they can win it, and they have played themselves well to the point where they're at that point where they're there. Like everyone keeps saying how, they've screwed up. They should have just taken what they had. Like, they're screwed with this and that. I couldn't disagree more with that, because as long as you have him under contract for 4 more years, he legally cannot play for another team. So it's the only leverage he has is the leverage that is the illusion of leverage that is created by him and Rich Paul and all them. So I think really it's in the Sixers boat, no matter what the clutch pulls. It's going to be really fun to see, and I'm excited to see how training camp plays out. I'll say that.
Yeah, so we're 15 days away from training camp, 14, whenever this drops, 14 days away, about 2 weeks away from training camp starting, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about. Is a pretty quick turnaround. So there's going to be a lot of questions answered in a pretty near future, but we'll move on past Ben, because there's a lot more to this team to kind of digest, and not a ton of changes, but some functionality changes that will go into next season. So maybe even aside from Maxey, because the expectation for him has gone way up for this upcoming season, is there another younger guy that you're looking at to make a larger impact?
So Isaiah Joe is one. I just think he's going to be somebody who they probably use more, just because his shooting gravity as someone who's just going to catch and let it fly is so important, and it's what you need for a team that has a dominant face of the franchise that operates out of the post and out of the face up so much. So I think it's Isaiah Joe is going to be somebody. I think like Paul Reed's going to play a role. I'm interested to see where he ends up fitting in terms of his positional usage, because I'm not like convinced there's like a ton of internal agreement as to like what he is, whether he's a 4 or 5, just because there's some stuff like through the grapevine, but also just the way he was playing in summer league, where 1 minute he's playing out of the post and next he's playing on the perimeter, and you're just like, well, wait a minute, weren't you just like, where what is the line of thought here? So I'm not sure whether they're telling him like to play like a center or play like power forward. That's why I asked him in summer league. I was like, are you trying to play like just try to play and like do new things, or are you playing with a purpose, and are you playing the way they told you to play? He's like, no, I'm just doing what they told me to do. I was like, well, that's weird because I don't know what this is. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I liked the Georges Niang pickup a lot. I think he's an underrated, valuable addition, especially when you consider that he's filling in the Mike Scott role. Like, there was little that you couldn't do to upgrade that position. So I mean, that was good. I think on paper they're a better team than last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to look at it, and with all the turmoil that's happened over the last like 3 months or so, following that obviously disappointing loss in the playoffs, I think they have kind of revamped. But it'll be definitely interesting to see a lot of things. Like I said, a lot of questions to be answered. I do want to swing it to Sean here, because he's got a lot of questions for you about the 2K ratings coming up with the new 2K22 dropping. And we're just going to go a little, he's going to throw a rating at you. Just think if it's under or over in terms of what you think those players should be rated as.
All right. Yeah. And real quick to touch on the Paul Reed, because I'm a huge Paul Reed fan and what he can bring. His answer to you on the one question was that he projects himself as a versatile power forward or a versatile 4, and then went out and talked about how he wanted to have a triple double. So there's a lot of like, can't quite put him in a box in a way that I would love to, but he's just effective out there in a way that I want to see it. And I want him to work through the growing pains. So I'm all about finding a way to get B-ball Paul in the rotation.
I think, like, in theory, yeah, you want him to be able to work through the growing pains. I also just don't trust that this organization has like the patience for letting them go through growing pains. I don't think there's any desire to do that. I mean, I think last season when they traded Tony Bradley for George Hill, part of that was Daryl trying to say like, get him in the rotation and play him because he's good. And Doc was like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to stay here and not do that. So I think in theory, like, you're right, but at the end of the day, the coach is the one that's going to decide that.
For sure. And that is the issue with Doc. And I understand from an organizational standpoint, I do strongly believe like those growing pains and getting Paul Reed into a playable player by playoff time and just having that switchability defensively is something this team lacks so heavily. And I think that's where we got burned with Dwight Howard. And I see it happen in the same way with Andre Drummond this year. So to me, it's worth taking those batters, but I think you're right that we probably don't see it happen.
Yeah, I think he'll get more minutes. I just don't think it's going to be something where they're like super liberal with their usage of him and they're letting him like go and make mistakes. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we'll start with B-ball Paul for the 2K ratings. 72 overall. Too high, too low, or just right?
Ooh, 72. I'd probably go a little higher because usually the guys in their late 60s are like either unplayable or they're dead-eye shooters that can't do anything else. So I think I'm going to go like 74. That seems like a fair spot to have. That's like TJ McConnell territory. I think that's fair.
James?
I think that, 72. Yeah, I think 74 sounds pretty good for B-ball Paul.
Yeah, I like that a little more too. It is interesting. A lot of these in the same kind of area, so we'll dig through them one by one. Georges Niang, 73 overall.
Ooh, I go B-ball Paul 74. I gotta go George's at 75. 75. We'll 75.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Niang is just lights out from everywhere around the perimeter. So, I mean, if I'm playing 2K, he might be in my starting lineup. So we never know.
There you go. So Sixers team getting a boost right now. And the thing about Niang is just an objectively good shooter, regardless of position. So that's got to be his biggest asset there. To move on to Furkan. Furkan, we got at a 75. Happy to have him back. Thoughts on that?
Oh, I see that contract and I think, oh, they want to. That's a trade chip if I've ever seen one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go high. I would.
I
think that's 71.
71. I'm a Furkan guy, so I think that sounds about right though. 75, and I agree with you, Austin. I think that is. And you mentioned Isaiah Joe earlier, which is a guy that kind of fills that similar role as Furkan. So it could be a trade season for Furkan, but I do love myself some Furkan Corp.
I will say this, like people, you can argue, you can debate like whether it's like a tradable contract. I pay close attention to the fact that they haven't had his reintroductory press conference yet, whereas they have had Danny Green's and like Andre Drummond's, and we're in a Zoom world, so it isn't like he's like out of the country, can't do it. Like, no, something smells fishy to me there.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening too. And regardless, he's a good guy to have around. So if he's here, I'm still happy for it. For reference, we'll go Isaiah Joe at 71. Too high, too low, or just right?
Just right.
I think that's fair. Right. All right, Shake Milton, 76.
Too high, I think.
It sounds pretty high, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's
73. Is what I would
say. I think it's a little surprising to be sitting about this. I saw one early report where he was ranked like an 83, and I thought that was absolutely absurd, and it definitely was. But even 76, I think, is a little too much for him.
Yeah.
All right, Tyrese Maxey, 76.
I go 78.
Mm-hmm.
Way too low. I'm thinking he's 79, 70, 80, maybe up there.
I think he's a guy that's going to be itching on the 80s by like midway through this year, and he's definitely a guy that's looked at to take the leap. So it's going to be exciting to see. Austin, what do you think about from him this year?
So I think he's the factor and the variable
for sure
that is going to take this team from like, oh, they're middling and like they'll win their regular season games, but they're like they're not going to do anything in the playoffs. They're either going to be that, or they're a team that can basically narrowly miss a beat with Ben Simmons gone. And I think so much of it has to do with the improvement they're going to be as a half court offense with Tyrese Maxey in the starting lineup, assuming Ben isn't there. So I think he's going to be awesome. I was going to write this article, but someone else at my website is going to do it. But basically, there's like a huge precedence for guys that are finishing like rookies that finish top 5-ish in driving efficiency to become stars, and he's grading right out to be like one of those guys. So if he becomes an all-star like by year 3, year 4, wouldn't be that surprising to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm all about it. And the work ethic he puts in, the potential, and just like how lovable this guy is, I got nothing but love for Maxey, and my hopes are sky high for him. We'll transition to Danny Green at 77. Too high, too low, or just right?
I love DJ. I love that guy. 77 feels right. It's probably maybe even a little bit high. Probably 77, 76 is fair.
Yeah, I was going to agree, like right around that range.
Yeah, I think a little high in my mind too. I kind of think prime Danny Green's a pretty 77 player to me. So I think at this stage, maybe notching a 70, bump him down to 75. Seth Curry, 77 as well.
Probably just right. I think it's probably like, I think you can make the argument either way. Cause like he's a definitive notch down from Daniel defensively, but I think he's like a pretty significant step up offensively. So I think you could go either way.
Yeah, I'm going to go too low on this. I think it's low too. I think there's that him and Danny Green are kind of trending in the opposite directions career-wise, and some of that comes with just age. But I think what Curry possesses offensively, I mean, he was our most consistent player through the playoffs all year last year, and not that I expect that same effort, but I do think it's valid just kind of that there's more to his bag than he gets credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little bit too low for Seth Curry. I would have him up there 70. I mean, I think even like 78 sounds about right, but even a little bit too low. Creeping up towards maybe 80.
I think people like take kind of for granted just how great Seth was in the playoffs.
Right.
Like, he got torched. He was shooting like 60% from 3 on for him this for him in that season, relatively speaking, an unprecedented volume of 3-point shots, and he was like doing a lot of creation off the dribble himself. Like, and that should have told everyone right there just how good the Sixers' chances were. Because if Seth Curry is your primary initiator in the second round of the playoff series, you're in deep problems.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a fantastic contract. One of the reasons that Daryl is someone who I think is worth going to bat for in this.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I thought throughout the season is you see how selective Curry can be with when he shoots the ball, just like not forcing shots. And I thought he was such a great shooter because of that, and just kind of that was skewed the numbers. And then in the playoffs, when we saw him kind of bite off a larger role and still putting up these same numbers and even better, it was awesome to me. And I love that he's still here for 2 more years.
Yeah, it'd be better if he actually resigns for extended stay, and maybe gets his brother to request a trade.
Yeah, absolutely. Never kicking him out. All right, Andre Drummond at 79.
God, no. 72, 70, 73. I mean, like, what is Andre Drummond? He's like an elite rebounder, especially in the offensive glass.
And the 4th highest rated 2K player on the Sixers roster, which is pretty absurd.
That's embarrassing to 2K.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, he's the 4th highest rated player. So above him, we'll go. I think we're all in agreement for too high on that one. Now we'll hop to the man of the hour, Ben Simmons at 84, which is the lowest since his rookie year. He also,
go ahead.
He also, real quick on Ben, has a lower 3-point shooting than Boban.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Boban can shoot it a little bit. He will shoot it a little bit. Probably about right. I think 84. I mean, he's taken a massive step back not even just this year, but like I think last year I would say was his best year. I think he was the best player on the team last year, comparatively speaking. Just it was messy this past season. So yeah, I think 84 is fair. Maybe 85.
James?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like he's better than that. Like, I feel like there's a better Ben in that body than what we saw. But yeah, I guess 84 to start this year maybe is the right call.
Yeah, to me that's fair. And from the Ben Simmons we've seen, I think you can find guys a little lower than 84 rated to serve that job, which I think says a lot. 2 more now. Tobias Harris at 85.
Probably go 87 for him.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So that seems low. That definitely seems low. Especially considering that they ranked him, NBA ranked him as the 7th best power forward, which I also thought was kind of low. But yeah, I think like high-ish 80s, 87, 88.
Yeah, I saw that story, that rankings, and the one for whoever was directly in front of him, I forget who it was the only one in front of him that I disagreed with. But I was like, okay, yeah, this sounds about right. And like, he gets so much flack, and he'll be the one that they turn to send off into the abyss once Ben's gone. But he's like a really, really good player. Like,
yeah,
just a scratching all-star level, I think.
I agree. And I think Tobias covered a lot of the Ben Simmons slack last year with the way he could get a bucket in the 4th and be an isolation scorer. And I'm cool with Toby. I think a couple notches higher for sure. And then last one, Joel Embiid, 95 overall. Now, for reference, that is behind LeBron, KD, Giannis, Steph, and then tied with Kawhi, Jokic.
I go higher. I go probably 96, 97.
Yeah. Crazy there's no one over 96.
I mean, yeah, as number one, because they really love to just toss those to LeBron and KD and whoever else. But like, realistically, what are the holes in his game? I mean, yeah, his passing is inconsistent. His turnovers are a problem. That's never been enough to like downgrade somebody from being a 97 or whatever the highest rating has been. He was like a 37% 3-point shooter, which is above average, 85 from the line, whatever. I think maybe higher than that, and arguably the most dominant offensive player in the league last year. And then a ridiculously franchise-altering impact defensive player. So what more do you need to be higher than a 96? I mean, come on. I think that's a little bit low.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not much to say about Joel. Like, I agree completely with you, but I just as long as he's in that top tier of players, I think that it's not even disrespect to Joel as much as it is like just kind of putting him in that higher group of players. I think because like you said, I think 7 is a little bit low in terms of like the rankings in the top 10 players, and then I think 95 is a bit low because I just don't see many. Where do the points come off in terms of what is he missing? So I agree it's a little bit low, but like as long as he's up in that higher tier of players, I guess it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it boils down to is just Embiid doesn't really fit like the narrative that sells the modern NBA. Like,
yeah,
the story of Giannis is so appealing at a national level, or at a global level, I should say. Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant. LeBron is LeBron. Those guys are all massive marketing for the NBA. And Joel is a representative of the process, and the process is a representative of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is the doormat across most sports. So I think it's just going to be a matter of like, you need to play above what the MVP level is in order to get recognized in the city, I think.
Yeah. And real quick, just like as much as we all get caught up on like getting better and everything, there is a little bit of just a sit back and appreciate just how good he's gotten, and all the hopes of what he could be kind of coming to fruition, and just seeing the guy and the player that he's developed into has been so awesome. Just have a front row seat for all that. And I agree, he's right up there with all the best in the league, and it's so cool to just call him our own.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Austin, I want to throw this to you one last time around. If you have anything to plug, we're going to wrap it up here. So, toss out anything you're coming up with, anything you're excited for. We're going to give you some time here to do whatever you need.
Sure. I have a story hopefully coming up for training camp. Not like anything groundbreaking, but I think it's definitely a unique idea for a Ben Simmons story. So do look out for that. It's going to be a large compilation of discussions. So it'll be interesting.
All right, man. Well, obviously, we appreciate it so much for you hanging around and giving us a little bit of your time. You can follow Austin at NBA Krell. That's Krell. Seriously, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on, and we wish you the best of luck for this season, and go Sixers.
Thanks, guys.